Before we start tonight's stories, I want you to think about something. Have you ever checked every lock in your house, looked under the bed, closed the curtains, and still felt like something was already inside with you? Because the stories you're about to hear tonight allegedly came from places so isolated, so quiet, that nobody nearby could hear you scream anyway. And the worst part? Both of these encounters started with greed. Simple greed. But whatever answered back wasn't human. Welcome to 3 a.m. Horror Audio. Story 1. The Stallion of Goulburn Valley. This story was allegedly shared by a former resident of a small town in Australia's Goulburn Valley sometime in the early 90s. And honestly, if even half of this is true, I don't know how anybody in that valley slept afterward. There was a man named Elias. People around town respected him. Quiet guy. Kept to himself. Worked with horses most of his life. But everybody knew him because of one animal. A massive black stallion. Jet black. Fast as hell. Almost unnatural looking. At local bush races, people already knew the outcome before the race even started. If Elias showed up with that horse, everybody else was fighting for second place. But there was another man in town named Isaac. And people talked about Isaac carefully, quietly, like they were afraid he might somehow hear them. Apparently, Isaac was obsessed with strange rituals, old practices, things the older farmers refused to discuss after dark. Nobody had proof, but they stayed away from him anyway. One afternoon, Isaac approached Elias after a race and offered to buy the stallion. Not rent it. Not breed it. Buy it outright? For an amount of money people said was insane for the time, but Elias refused immediately. The horse wasn't for sale. At any price, that's when Isaac leaned close to him and said something Elias would later repeat to his wife. If I can't own that animal, you'll pray you never did. Now here's where things start getting weird. Because according to Elias's family, nothing happened at first. For almost a week, life stayed normal. Then his wife started waking up screaming every single night. Same time. She claimed there was someone standing in the corner of their bedroom, watching her sleep, not moving, just staring. Elias searched the house constantly. Windows, doors, closets, nothing. But his wife kept getting worse. Pale, exhausted, barely speaking, like somebody had drained the life out of her little by little. And then the horse changed too. According to Elias, the stallion stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly. It would stand motionless inside the stable for hours, staring into empty darkness like it saw somebody standing there. Imagine walking outside at 3 inches the morning and seeing a 1,000-pound animal terrified of something you can't see. That alone would have been enough for most people. But it got worse. A lot worse. Elias finally decided to get rid of the horse entirely. Not because he stopped loving it, because he was scared of it. He sold the stallion to a buyer a couple towns away. And for about 3 days, everything seemed normal again. Then the buyer came back. The man looked half dead, hands shaking, could barely speak. He told Elias he wanted the horse gone immediately. Elias asked why, and the buyer said something that reportedly haunted the valley for years afterward. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., that horse cries. Not neighs, not screams, cries like a grown man sobbing. The buyers swore the sound echoed through the property every night without fail, and eventually the neighbors started hearing it too. Kids refused to walk near Elias's paddock after sunset. People began avoiding the entire road. Even hardened farmers admitted they heard something crying from inside that stable after midnight. And then Isaac came back. Late one evening, Elias heard knocking at his front door. Not loud, slow, patient. When he opened it, Isaac was standing there smiling. Not angry, not drunk, satisfied, like somebody waiting to watch a fire finally spread. According to Elias, Isaac calmly admitted he had placed eyes on the horse through rituals after Elias wounded his pride, and before leaving, Isaac told him this: "Some things don't belong to you once they've been seen." That sentence terrified Elias more than the crying, because for the first time, he believed him. The next morning, Elias walked to the stable before sunrise and immediately noticed something wrong. The horse was silent, completely silent. He stepped inside and froze. The stallion was dead. But according to what this family later claimed, there was almost no blood. No signs of struggle, no broken wood, no tracks leading in or out of the stable, nothing. The animal's head had been removed with what Elias described as impossible precision, like it had happened instantly, cleanly, and nobody in town could explain it. Not police, not local vets, nobody. After that night, people said Isaac stopped appearing in public. A few weeks later, he allegedly passed away unexpectedly, and strangely, the crying stopped too, immediately. No more sounds from the stable, no more screaming from Elias's wife, just silence. But people in the valley still talked about the property for years. Because even after the stable was torn down, neighbors claim they still woke up sometimes around 3 a.m., thinking they heard somebody sobbing somewhere far off in the dark. And honestly, if you heard that sound outside your house tonight, would you even look out the window? Story 2. The Sovereigns of the South Island. This next account allegedly came from New Zealand's South Island back in the late 1980s, and this one feels different, because unlike the first story, this didn't start with revenge. It started with temptation. A bushman named Nigel had spent most of his life working deep in the forests along the west coast. Hard man, practical man, not the type to believe in curses, or ghosts, or stories old miners used to whisper after too many drinks. But one afternoon, while clearing ancient trees near an abandoned mining trail, Nigel cut into a massive hollow trunk, and something fell out of the canopy above him. Hard, heavy. A clay pot exploded across the forest floor. Inside were dozens of old gold sovereigns and 2 enormous black toads. Nigel later claimed the moment he reached toward the coins, the toads suddenly started smashing their heads against nearby rocks, over and over, until they stopped moving completely, like they were guarding the gold, and failed. Now imagine standing alone in a dead silent forest, holding gold nobody should have found, while 2 animals kill themselves at your feet. Most people would walk away. Nigel didn't. He hid the coins from the other workers immediately. Didn't report them. Didn't tell anybody. He brought the pot home and buried it beneath his floorboards. That's when everything in his life began collapsing. Fast. Within weeks, his daughter's engagement suddenly fell apart. No explanation. Then she became violently ill. Doctors couldn't figure out why. And not long after, she passed away. Nigel became convinced the gold was cursed. He dug the coins back up in the middle of the night and moved them to an abandoned cemetery near his property. A tiny, forgotten place with collapsing graves and broken stone markers. He hid the clay pot inside an old crypt, hoping whatever followed those coins would stay there. But it didn't stop, because only a month later, his son died too. And that broke him completely. Nigel eventually confessed everything to a few men from the local community. He begged them to help him return the gold to the forest where it was found. So one night, several of them walked together toward the cemetery carrying lanterns and shovels. And apparently, none of them ever forgot what they saw waiting inside that crypt. Coiled tightly around the clay pot was a massive black serpent, far larger than anything native to New Zealand. The men stood frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They claimed the snake never attacked. It just watched them, like it already knew why they came. One of the men later said the serpent's eyes looked almost human, aware, patient, and according to the story, nobody touched the gold after that night. Nobody dared. The coins remained hidden inside that cemetery crypt for years afterward. Still guarded, still waiting, Nigel spent the rest of his life isolated from almost everyone he knew. People claimed he barely slept, barely talked. Like part of him stayed trapped in that forest beside the shattered clay pot forever. And maybe the scariest part is this. Somewhere out there, those coins could still exist, waiting for the next person desperate enough to pick them up. If you're still awake right now, and this story made you double-check the dark corners of your room, hit subscribe and join us here at 3 a.m. Horror Audio. Because every week we dive into allegedly true horror stories, Reddit horror encounters, stalker cases, isolated town legends, and late-night experiences people still can't explain. And if you have your own nightmare keeping you awake, something you've never told anyone, send it to misshorbmm42@gmail.com. I might narrate your encounter next. Before you go, tell me this in the comments. If you found that gold hidden in the forest, would you have taken it anyway? Stay safe. And maybe tonight, leave a light on. Welcome to 3 a.m. Horror Audio.